The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The Trump campaign is in total and utter chaos. Remember not long ago when Donald Trump fired that outrageous campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, and replaced him with Paul Manafort? Remember when all sorts of connections between Paul Manafort and pro-Russian groups surfaced, including the New York Times allegation that $12.7 million in payments, potentially illegal payments, were in a handwritten ledger for Manafort and his organization? All of that was, of course, denied by the Trump campaign. And yet, Paul Manafort has now been effectively fired as Trump's campaign manager, although in name, he will remain the campaign chairperson to, I guess, make it seem like they're not in total and utter chaos. Paul Manafort is basically out as the effective manager of the campaign almost as quickly as he was in. He has been replaced. Sit down for this. He has been replaced by two people. Number one, this Republican strategist and pollster, Kellyanne Conway. Okay, I sort of understand that. She knows more about how Republicans can appeal to women, and she has some expertise there. Makes sense. Although she's been a pretty aggressive bomb thrower on CNN for the last 6 months. And Breitbart News CEO Steve Bannon. This is the same Breitbart News that parrots all sort of conspiracy theories, including all of the recent unfounded allegations about Hillary Clinton being very, very ill and on the verge of death, seemingly. He now is going to be the co-campaign manager for Donald Trump, along with Kellyanne Conway. This comes the day after we learned about numerous reports that serial sexual assault accusee, actually, no, I'm sorry. I want to speak clearly this evening. Serial sexual harassment accusee, note the word, the use of the word accusee, and former Fox News chief Roger Ailes is also advising Donald Trump. And as I mentioned, Paul Manafort is going to stay on as the campaign chairman, clearly just for PR purposes to make it seem like less of a shakeup than it really is. So think about it. Trump's campaign is now being advised and managed by a combination of Roger Ailes, a right-wing bomb thrower who is currently facing over 20 accusations of sexual harassment in his role at Fox News, and the guy who directs Breitbart News, a total right-wing bomb-throwing website that also regularly publishes unfounded conspiracies. The real question, Lewis, is not to figure out exactly how nuts these people are, but to think about what they can possibly do to the Trump campaign. One is put Trump on a teleprompter, right? We stop all press conferences and casual question-answer periods, put Trump on a teleprompter, limit his interviews, craft the message very, very specifically. Of course, we know Trump seems crazy when he reads from a teleprompter, might not be the best idea. The other possibility, and I mention this because Breitbart has been a key player in the Hillary is really sick conspiracy theories, like physically, health-wise sick. Maybe they can just frame the entire Trump campaign. It's never been about issues other than crazy stuff like ban Muslims. They could just make the entire campaign about, hey, Trump is healthy and Hillary isn't, and try to pivot to that. I'm thinking out loud here. I don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah, well, Trump's campaign is kind of a mess, kind of a disaster. So do they say, are these people who are thinking, we need to clean this up a bit. This needs to be cleaner, sleeker, less insane. Donald Trump needs to shut up and stop putting his foot in his mouth. Or are they going to go down the Breitbart route? Yeah. And oh boy, if you thought it was ugly before.
A lot of people are saying now it's actually going to get ugly. Really? Yeah. What was it before? I mean, that's amazing. I can't wait for the finger pointing, right? I mean, so many people have been in and out. It's been like a revolving door in this abortive campaign that at this point, I would believe that divine, you know how we always say, it's so pompous to think that God, if he or she exists, gets involved in the politics in one election cycle, in one country, on one continent, on one planet, in one solar system, in one galaxy of this amazing universe that he or she created. I would actually believe it if somehow Trump is able to turn this around and put together what seems like a normal campaign. I would only believe that it were possible through divine intervention.
Well, I'd go the opposite with that. I would say that if it's possible for Donald Trump to become president, intelligent design is a farce, and we're really just incredibly dumb creatures that did come from fish and single-cell organisms.
Do you have any idea what the hell is going on in Texas right now? I've told you a little bit about these Turn Texas Blue movements, the idea that if you really focus on the bluer or more purple areas of Texas, potentially you could turn Texas from a reliable red state into a swing state within a couple of election cycles. We have a new poll from the admittedly Democratic polling firm PPP, which has Donald Trump only 6 points ahead of Hillary Clinton in Texas, 50 to 44. An average of recent Texas polls, which I will show you now, has Donald Trump ahead by 8.4 points. You'll notice the PPP poll there has it Trump +6, whereas the KTVT poll says Trump +11, and the Texas Tribune poll has it at Trump +8. An average lead for Donald Trump in Texas of 8.4, but the most recent poll saying Trump +6. This is stunning. It is shocking. It is reflective of how insane this year's election is, but I hope you're sitting down for this. This is the truly crazy thing going on in Texas right now. You know how there's this secessionist movement in Texas of some people in Texas, mostly right-wingers, who want to separate and become the country of Texas, no longer part of the United States? The PPP poll also polled its respondents on the topic of secession. And the ideological split is insane. Let's break this down piece by piece. Check out this quote from the poll, and we'll walk through it. Overall, 26% of Texas voters would support leaving the United States, while 59% of Texas voters want to stay. 15% aren't sure. Love to talk to that 15% who says, I might want my state to be part of the U.S., but I might not. I'm just not sure right now. Among Trump voters, this is the key line. Among Trump voters, support for secession goes up to 37%, with only 49% opposed to exiting. This is amazing. Clinton leads Trump 54 to 41 among those who want Texas to remain part of the U.S. So if you divide Texas into people who say, yeah, I'm interested in my state being part of the U.S., and those who say, I am interested in my state leaving, Hillary is killing Trump in Texas among voters who want to remain as part of the United States.
That makes perfect sense to me, doesn't it? I mean, the craziest thing would be that if she were leading with the secessionists, right?
Yeah, well, of course. But the idea that even in Texas, you would think, okay, listen, you've got the secessionist movement in Texas, but it's really not that big, and it's not completely concentrated on the right or whatever. So Texas is just generally red. So you wouldn't expect Hillary to have a 13-point lead among the non-secessionists in Texas. That is truly incredible.
Also, the fact that she does seem to have some support from secessionists as well. I mean, it's just Texas is becoming an increasingly confusing place.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Trump's lead in Texas is also based on holding the senior vote. Trump is leading the senior citizen vote 63 to 33 with voters under 65, right? So if Texas had only people under 65 vote, Hillary Clinton is ahead there. When you look at voters under age 45, Hillary Clinton is up by 25 percentage points in Texas. Older voters are overwhelmingly responsible for the Republican advantage in Texas. So when you look, Lewis, at the idea of turning Texas blue and you say, hey, hold on a second, increased percentage of the population identifies as Hispanic or Latino, they tend to vote for Democrats. You have the older voters aging out. They are the ones disproportionately voting for Republicans. It is not crazy to think about Texas becoming a swing state in the near future. Now, just to show you how huge this would be, I ran an electoral map to show you where I switched Texas to blue, okay? Texas, if Texas were to go blue, I then gave Donald Trump, and I'm not saying Texas will go blue this year, but imagine a future where it does, right? If Texas goes blue, you can give Florida to Donald Trump. You can give Ohio to Donald Trump. You can give Georgia, which is in play now, to Donald Trump. You can give Iowa, which is considered a tie right now, to Donald Trump. You give Trump New Hampshire, which is the lone New England state that he might actually be able to win. Give Trump Nevada. Give him Utah. Give him Arizona. Give him everything, right? Give him everything. But if you keep Texas blue, Hillary Clinton still wins without any of those other states. She doesn't need a single one of those hugely important states. So I get, Lewis, what it would mean for national electoral politics if you throw Texas into the swing state category.
It will happen, right? Imagine in 10 years, 20 years, it's got to happen.
And your mic was absolutely on during that, right?
It was.
Absolutely good. Terrific. We really haven't been having issues with that lately, which I'm thrilled about.
It's it's my fault when things go wrong. It's not like there's a technical issue and something's broken. It's my fault when that happens, and I've been performing well.
On the ball, no doubt about it. Okay, let me talk to you now about maybe the craziest proposal from Donald Trump yet. It has nothing to do with the clothing that Melania would be forced to or barred from wearing if she were to be First Lady. That is not what I'm going to talk to you about today. It relates to Trump's Muslim ban. Donald Trump initially proposed the Muslim ban. It then became a huge attention getter. It has attracted some of the most extreme lunatics to the Trump campaign. But it's also been a real problem for Trump because, for example, it would be unconstitutional according to people who understand the Constitution. And Trump has shifted on what exactly it would be, right? First, it was we're going to ban Muslim immigration, period, until we figure out what the hell is going on. Then it's a temporary travel ban for Muslims from certain countries. Then it's just for people from certain countries, regardless of whether they're Muslim or not. It's countries associated with terror. But which countries would be on the list, we don't know. Completely unhinged, ridiculous, unconstitutional idea. So now Donald Trump has decided to cap off, I would say, the most inflammatory and ignorant and pointless policy idea of his entire campaign by saying he would impose what he calls extreme vetting, a sort of ideological test on people who want to come into the country as immigrants. The test would be meant to somehow confirm that people wanting to come in share what Trump describes as American values. And it depends where in the world you come from. There would be some parts of the world, Lewis, where if you want to come to the U.S., you're exempt from the test. Now, of course, which areas those are continues to be a mystery. But Donald Trump then talked about this ideological test that these immigrants would have to face. Here is Donald Trump talking about this a little bit. Now, I'll warn you, you might not recognize Trump's delivery. He is going to be looking to his sides a lot and speaking in a very bizarre cadence. That's because he's using a teleprompter during this speech, something he criticizes other politicians for, then does himself, but far worse than any of the others do it. Take a look.
A Trump administration will establish a clear principle that will govern all decisions pertaining to immigration. And we will be tough. And we will be even extreme. We should only admit into this country those who share our values and respect our people. In the Cold War, we had an ideological screening test. The time is overdue to develop a new screening test for the threats we face today. I call it extreme vetting. I call it extreme vetting. Our country has enough problems.
Yeah.
We don't need more. And these are problems like we've never had before.
One of the main problems is Trump's a nominee in a major party. I like when he does the teleprompter thing. He shifts very dramatically from one side all the way over to the other side to look at his prompter screens, his prompter mirrors. And it's very, very strange. But because you might have been distracted by his delivery, I'm going to put up for you here Trump's immigrant ideology test. So basically he said, number one, we're only going to admit those who share our values and respect our people. Defined how? Totally subjective, absolutely meaningless. Number two, we're going to screen out members or sympathizers of terrorist groups. So what, you're just going to ask them if they sympathize with those groups? Couldn't people just lie? Number three, you're going to screen out anyone who has a hostile attitude towards our country or its principles. Does being against drone warfare count as being hostile to one of the principles of the U.S.? Drone warfare is a really big thing now. Again, totally subjective. We're going to screen out anyone who believes that Sharia law should supplant American law. I predict not many people would admit to that if they're trying to get into the United States. They are going to screen out anyone who doesn't believe in our Constitution. Really, I wonder if you suggest banning people from the country on the basis of religion, would that actually make you be barred from the country under Trump's ideological test? Because if so, many of his own supporters would be banned from the country. And lastly, anyone who supports bigotry and hatred, well, there goes a whole bunch of Trump supporters right out the window. This is totally insane. And the craziest part, he reminisces positively about when during the Cold War we needed ideological tests. You know what Trump is talking about, right? Are you or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? He is reminiscing about going back to that time with some test that you're going to give. In what language will the test be given? That's one question, right? And of course, number two, if these are evil people, as Trump describes some of them to be, don't you think they would just be prepared to lie on the ideological test?
Yeah, I'm not sure what Donald Trump is trying to get across here. It's the idea that he'll be tough. It's the idea that he'll keep all the terrorists out. But if you look at this plan in detail, it doesn't make much sense. Now, the Netherlands, what they have when you apply for immigration status is, as we've discussed, this video that they show you.
Right.
And the idea is that, well, these are our values. We have values in this country, and if this video upsets you, you might not be a good fit.
Right.
Of course, in this country, we don't even have a consensus about
what those values should be.
What our values are.
No doubt. Yeah, this makes no sense. It is absolutely, it's the lowest of the low in capping off the most ridiculous proposal from Trump, other than maybe punishing women who have abortions and building a wall that Mexico is not going to pay for, that would really not solve the immigration situation that we have in the U.S.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Jerome Jamrock. Jerome Jamrock, thank you so much for being a David Pakman Show member. You can join Jerome and support strong, independent media, non-corporate media by signing up at davidpakman.com/membership. The show has always been free and it will always be free, but our paid subscribers are helping to fund the production of the show. And we produce an extra show every single day just for our paid subscribers. Sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. All right, we have a Hatriot Mail this week.
Hatriot Mail, your break from the tyranny of unbiased, independent media. Because knowledge and information are just communist conspiracies. Hatriot Mail, written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
All right, this Hatriot Mail is going to relate to some ongoing themes on the show. I'll present it without any further introduction, and then we can discuss.
I would like to see this gay dweeb confined to live in a neighborhood with Muslims he loves so much. After they string him up or throw him off a balcony for being a homosexual, perhaps they will realize why most of us hate these assholes and want them to go back from whatever shithole they came from.
Yeah. I'm sort of over-exploring why there's so much focus on my perceived sexual orientation that we've done ad nauseum on the show. The interesting thing for me here are basically two things. Number one, this is an appeal to emotion, right? If only I went to these so-called Muslim neighborhoods as a supposed gay man, which, you know, we've dealt with that before, then I would change my view about something. And this is sort of like, well, you would be for the death penalty if someone you loved was killed. And I would actually argue decisions made in the heat of emotion are not actually how we should dictate any kind of national policy. That's number one. But of course, the other thing that this voicemail seems to ignore is that we've been hugely critical of radical Islam. And we've been hugely critical of the fact that radical Islam, number one, is a term that I'm willing to use. Number two, radical Islam is not good for women. It's not good for members of the LGBT community. It's almost, Lewis, like Hatriots write in an entire email based only on one sentence I might have at some point said without considering our broader points on the subject. That might be shocking. I don't know.
It happens all the time, or just one story. Someone will see one story, and from that one story, one YouTube segment, they understand everything about us and the show.
If you're going to write me this pond scum garbage, these loser critiques, at least make them based on what we say on the show, not some half-baked analysis based on hearing 2 seconds. And by the way, I have a special membership coupon code. I want to turn Hatriot Mail into something positive that helps the show, as opposed to just hate. So you can use coupon code HATRIOT40, HATRIOT40. This will work 20 times at davidpakman.com/membership and will give you really nice, solid discount off of membership. It's the best way I can think of to turn patriotism into something positive for the show. I want to talk a little bit about the flooding going on in Louisiana. Red Cross is calling this the nation's worst disaster since Superstorm Sandy. We have had double digits number of people killed, 40,000 homes affected, 30,000 people rescued. This is being described as the worst flooding to hit the state of Louisiana by some, although I don't know if there is a complete scientific or meteorological consensus on that. About 8,000 people remain in emergency shelters, and most of Louisiana has received at least a foot of rain since the beginning of this past weekend, some places getting as much as 30 inches of rain. Roland Spano Jr., who's been a member for nearly a year, reached out to me and sent me video and pictures that he took in Louisiana of the devastating flooding. The first is a video that I'll show you and sort of describe for you here, which is actually Roland in a boat, and you can see the water level almost as high as street signs. You can see only the tops of trees. The water seems absolutely filthy, which often happens when floodwaters come in. Really, really, really horrible stuff. And then also a couple of pictures to show you that Roland took. Houses, I mean, half covered by water. Amazing. We have one other picture to show you here. This seems to be a parking lot where you see cars half covered by water, and this is just absolutely disastrous. And Roland actually told me that he was involved in a rescue here, and that he was in the last truck out when rescuing his cousin and her husband. A lot of people have what some would describe sort of like as an irrational fear of flooding, even living in parts of the country where flooding isn't likely. This stuff is the stuff of nightmares, though.
Yeah, and it's amazing the places that it can happen.
Not a surprise on the Louisiana coast.
No, no, not at all. But as sea levels rise and the weather changes and we get more and more storms every year, you got to start thinking about possibly avoiding the coast.
This is a climate change story, right? Climate change is not individual weather events. One flood, one record warm day, one record cold day. We've said time and again, we don't want to confuse individual weather events with climate. But when we talk about climate change, we are talking about sea level rise. We're talking about the possibility of coastal areas being permanently underwater as a result of sea level rise, along with patterns of continued record warm days, which we've seen, and I'll tell you about again in a second. Record cold days, flooding in areas that typically don't have it, or more often than they typically have it, or more inches of rain than they would typically have. As far as this individual weather event, it was caused by, number one, huge downpours of rain that are part of what the National Weather Service is calling an inland sheared tropical depression, happening at the same time as nearly record high moisture content in the air. So again, we want to distinguish between weather versus climate, Lewis, but we also want to think about how climate change will influence longer term frequency of certain types of weather events.
Erratic weather, this type of event, yes, it's very scary, but it's happening, and just to be aware of it. And if you live on the coast or in one of these areas, don't go without flood insurance.
I read that in some of these towns, 1-2% of the population of the properties were protected by flood insurance. And I get it, right? I mean, I have a friend who lives on a floodplain in Western Massachusetts. His insurance would have been $1,000 for the year had he been just slightly out of that floodplain. Being in the floodplain, it went up to $7,000 for the year. Some people think, oh, you just get the flood insurance premium. It's not like an extra $100 for the year. I mean, it's a huge, huge price difference. So I get not being able to afford that or opting against it. And then, unfortunately, these are the situations we have where most of those affected did not have flood insurance, and it's absolutely horrible. I know we've done this next story like 10 times, but I have the same thing to report to you yet again, this time about the last month, July of 2016, which was once again the hottest month in recorded history. NASA calculated that July of 2016 was about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the global average over the last 100 years. Scientists are blaming mostly human-caused climate change from the burning of fossil fuels, with an extra jump from the now gone El Nino, which has a pattern of a few years of naturally warming parts of the Pacific Ocean, which can change weather worldwide. The records go back to 1880. Okay, so let's go through some of the common talking points from those who don't believe climate change is taking place. Talking point number one is, David, you just said the records only go back to 1880. That's like 120 years, 135 years, 136 years to be exact. The Earth is, depending on who you ask, anywhere from 6,000 to 4.5 billion years old. What does a 120-year trend tell us? Well, the answer is we have lots of other data that we can look at much longer back into history than just surface temperatures, which is only one part of the picture. This includes carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and other markers. And it's sad when we hear people just say that without any real knowledge of what we can know.
Yeah, and one of the big ones is how can we figure out what was in the air thousands of years ago, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years ago?
Yeah, it's called science.
Look up ice cores. Ice cores. Look into that.
And that's only one element, of course. Now, number two, we always hear from some of these people, including on Fox News, David, we're regularly setting record cold temperatures, so there's no global warming. Well, we're talking about climate change. It's not just warming that is an observable issue. It's erratic temperature. And most scientific consensus climate change models predict that we would see both record highs and record low temperatures, longer summers in some areas, longer winters in other areas. We would see changes to the ice caps. We would see increased frequency of certain types of weather events. We would see drought in other areas, which we have been seeing in parts of the United States. And after hearing all of these talking points from the deniers, I'm always left with the same question, which is, do you really want to take a chance? Right now, this is the only planet we have. Yes, there are plans for the next 2, 4, 6, 8 years to make a first foray into Mars. But do we really want to take a chance of waiting until it goes completely bad before we take it seriously? And of course, many climate scientists already saying, oh no, it's already going bad. I mean, people are already being displaced by what we're seeing. I guess then the question is, do you want to wait until you are personally affected beyond any doubt before we take action? I don't. That's not the choice I would make.
I don't either. Yes, many scientists will say it's too late already. But until it starts affecting you, many people are just very selfish, and many businesses and corporations and polluters in general are more concerned with their personal wealth than what will be happening to their grandchildren.
And others say this is just cyclical. In 500 years, it'll all be fine again. Well, then I guess that's only something for you and your kids and their 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 kids, et cetera, to worry about. But then in 500 years, if they live long enough to birth children, to have children, that generation will be fine. And I guess for some people that makes them feel good. I don't know. It doesn't do much for me, I have to tell you.
And make you feel all warm and fuzzy inside? Yeah. Well, you're going to be feeling really warm or maybe very cold on the outside.
Depends where you are. Yeah, you could be cold or hot. Join us on Facebook. We have surpassed the 50,000 Facebook like mark. Make it one more by liking our Facebook page at facebook.com/David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Great to have back on the program Jen Briney, host of the Congressional Dish podcast, which exposes corporate influence in the bills and laws passed by Congress. Jen, you've been following the bombing by U.S. forces in Libya. I've been following it. The sort of public line is we are working here, we as the U.S. military, to suppress and fight ISIS. But as you've covered in a recent episode of your program, there's actually a lot more to this, isn't there?
There definitely is. So one of the things that I think is really important here is that, yes, ISIS has taken over the city of Sirte. And so that is why we're theoretically going into Libya again and bombing. But the city of Sirte, there were about 5,000 to 6,000 ISIS members at one point. Now there's 1,000. And so whatever the people in Libya were doing was working. And we're coming in at the last minute and bombing. So there's definitely another story here. It's also important to know that we had the United Nations invent another government in Libya. There's actually two governments right now. And we are acting as the military for the United Nations invented government. The elected government of Libya is right now the House of Representatives, who is refusing to recognize the government of national accord, the United Nations one, as the legal government of Libya. So we're getting involved in a civil war, just like we did in Syria. We are really the military of a government that was imposed upon these people. The Libyan people have no say in anything that we're doing.
And we continue to see this sort of vicious cycle of American foreign policy in certain parts of the world where we're doing airstrikes against ISIS because prior military and foreign policy decisions created a power vacuum, which led to the rise of ISIS. And this is unlikely to be the last time that we sort of observe this vicious cycle. We've seen it in Iraq. And that also, I think, is a story that even if you believe that the specifics now are related to ISIS, the bigger picture of having to go in to solve problems that we, in a sort of way, allowed to exist is not new to American foreign policy.
Not at all. I mean, we've never left Afghanistan. We never really left Iraq. My bigger concern at this point is that we're in Syria and Libya, which is two places that we never actually declared war on and that Congress had no say in us going into. I also don't think it's a coincidence that both of those wars were launched in August, because August is when Congress is on vacation. So it's very easy for the executive branch to go in there and bomb and know that their check and balance, the Congress, is not there to do anything about it. So I think that's not a coincidence. And I just don't really believe that this is all about ISIS, because just like you said, we went into Libya not because of ISIS, but because we wanted to regime change. We wanted to get rid of the government of Muammar Gaddafi. And one thing that is not being reported by anyone is that, like I said, ISIS's numbers were going down. And so there had to be another reason for us to go in there. Well, Muammar Gaddafi's son has been held in a Libyan prison ever since we regime changed. And it turns out 2 weeks before we started bombing, he was released. And so now he has aligned with that government that was elected by the Libyan people. They have their own military. They were attacking ISIS. And his hometown is the city of Sirte, which is the city that we're bombing. So this is bigger than ISIS. And like you said, it does go back to those reasons we regime changed in the first place. And, you know, when something is working, don't fix it. I think the thing that broke here is not ISIS. I think it's Muammar Gaddafi's son, Saif, getting out of prison. You
mentioned one other aspect I want to talk about, which is that there was no congressional vote on this action. These airstrikes were basically done under the legal authority of the 2001 authorization for military force that really was meant for the perpetrators of 9/11, Al-Qaeda, to go after those groups, and it's been used mostly for that. But with every passing year, that same authorization of force is used to create other offensives. And what's amazing to me is there's kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you can make a pretty good case that we're pretty far removed from that now, and really there should be a different legal authority for these actions. On the other hand, you can actually connect it to that authorization of force insofar as much of the instability we're now trying to deal with is related to prior decisions made under the exact same authorization of force. So as much as I'd like to say it's crazy to still rely on that, there is a connection you can draw.
See, I struggle to find the connection with Libya. I spent the last 2 weeks looking into why we regime changed in 2011, and it had nothing to do with 9/11. I also reread the 2001 authorization for the use of military force, which all Americans should do. It's less than a page. And it says specifically it's to go after the people that were involved in planning and attacking us on 9/11. Muammar Gaddafi was not one of them. And
No,
there's
I get
proof
that. And maybe
he
I
was.
misstated. Just in order to be clear, what I mean is, on the one hand, there's no doubt that it's being used now for incursions that don't actually have anything to do with the reason that we have that authorization for military force. What is interesting, and for me, this is not a justification, but it's more of something to think about, that the existence of ISIS is in many ways connected to the vacuum that was created by decisions made in relation to that original authorization for military force. It's not in any way of a defense of what we're doing. It's just sort of something that I can't help but think about whenever I realize how far we've strayed from the original point of that authorization.
Yeah, the snowball that just rolls down the hill and gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Correct.
That's really what we've created here, because it was 9/11, and then we went into Iraq on false pretenses, and then whoopsie, ISIS became a thing. You're right. It's all connected. It's just not a justification. The only thing I'm concerned about at this point is that Lindsey Graham, who's a crazy senator from South Carolina, he authored an authorization for the use of military force that Senator Mitch McConnell, who's the leader of the Senate, he had it skip the entire committee process. So it's ready for a vote in the Senate. So if we're calling our congressmen and encouraging them to do a new authorization for the use of military force, we might end up with the Lindsey Graham version, which is even worse than the 9/11 version. This one really does authorize war anytime, anywhere, against anyone. And I know that sounds extreme, but it's true. And so I'm really concerned that our reaction to this type of stuff is to be like, hey, we need a new authorization. We might want to be careful what we wish for here, because as bad as the 9/11 one is, the one they have waiting in the wings, this is going to authorize so much more than this one even does. And it doesn't seem to be holding back the Obama administration at all.
It's funny how, on the one hand, Lindsey Graham is often the voice of reason when it comes to the insanity of Donald Trump. And on the other hand, much less publicly, of course, he is doing this. Same Lindsey Graham, though.
Same guy. And I know Lindsey Graham from watching hearings. I watch him in the Senate Armed Services Committee all the time, where John McCain is the chairman. And that's where I really have concerns about him. I mean, I think he truly is afraid of everything. And so that's why he feels, and he asked the military commanders, like, wouldn't you like to be able to bomb wherever you feel is necessary at any time and have it be open-ended? Like, doesn't this sound great to you? And of course they said yes. But that's my concern with Lindsey Graham. I mean, he's definitely one of those people that tells you exactly what he thinks. But unfortunately, when it comes to matters of war, he feels like the executive branch, whether it's Democrat or Republican, should be able to kill people at any time. It's concerning.
In the last couple of minutes we have, since you've been covering this in a variety of different ways now for some time, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on what my view is right now with regard to the fight against ISIS. I've been saying for a while that I don't think it is going to be difficult to essentially eliminate all, quote, ISIS strongholds in Iraq, Syria, and to the extent that they still exist in Libya within something like 18 to 24 months. However, I think that it's going to be far more difficult to really go after these cells and these sort of more isolated lone wolf but ISIS-inspired types that we're seeing in Europe, in the United States, et cetera. And it presents a completely different challenge and question. Where are you on that idea?
So I agree with that if ISIS was actually our goal. But what I'm seeing in these hearings is that, you know, the Iraq-Syria situation is kind of combined now because they're trying to fight the caliphate in Iraq and Syria. But when you watch the hearings, everyone from the State Department and the Department of Defense is still talking about regime change. They still want to get rid of Bashir al-Assad. Mm-hmm. And in Libya, like I said, ISIS's numbers were going down dramatically and quickly. And so we didn't have to go in there. I honestly think it's to stop the Gaddafi regime from coming back. So if our goal was to actually stop these ISIS people, which, by the way, how do we define them? But if that was our goal, sure, we could pull that off. But what I'm seeing by watching Congress is that it's bigger than that. They're still trying to change regimes and using ISIS as an excuse. That's my biggest concern, is that this isn't really about ISIS. It's about other things, and ISIS is the lie.
No doubt. You know? And we won't get into this today, but ISIS has also been a useful prop for Russian involvement in the region, and that's something we've been talking about for a while as well. All right, Jen Briney, host of the Congressional Dish podcast. Check it out. Jen, thanks as always for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We know implicitly, and because Republicans have been caught admitting this more than once, that low-income and disproportionately non-white parts of the country where it's expected that voters will lean towards Democrats are targeted for voter suppression. This includes particularly stringent voter ID laws, which are often defended as, hey, it's a free ID, which we now know isn't really free because the documents you need to get the free ID actually cost money. We know about limiting early voting and limiting voting hours in general. We knew that this was hugely racially tinged, and we now have a new study which has identified an additional form of modern voter suppression that is hugely racially tinged, and that is long voting lines. The Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies looked at data from the Cooperative Congressional Election Study, and what they wanted to calculate was, what's the average long polling place wait time, and then how does that correlate to race? I doubt most people in our audience will be shocked by this graph, which shows us that black voters have double the average wait time of white voters, and you will see that blacks have the longest average wait times at 23 minutes, whereas whites have the shortest average wait time as 12 minutes. The ranking goes whites, Native Americans, Asian Americans, Latinos, and then African Americans. Of course, Native Americans having very, very low wait times because a significant portion of their voting is happening in particularly rural areas where they actually have more of a say of how those voting places are organized. Thus, it is a minority group that has not been negatively affected by these Republican tactics. Now, why is this happening? The study points to two reasons. Number one is lack of resources at polling places in minority neighborhoods. And we have a bunch of studies on this. There's one from the Brennan Center, which found that 3 of the states with the longest wait times, Florida, South Carolina, and Maryland, saw voters of color disproportionately going to polling places with fewer machines and fewer poll workers. We also see disproportionately outdated voting machines in the non-white areas. We also see more errors in the voting rolls. 1 in 8 registration records is invalid or has serious errors in some of these areas. So that's one explanation. The second one is cuts to early voting programs. Non-white voters tend to take advantage of early voting initiatives at a higher rate than white voters. Part of this is related to economics. Part of this is related to geography. Part of this is related to other issues involving in the South around black areas that are big churchgoers. It's related to churches organizing to get voters to the polls for early hours on a Sunday, for example, 2 days before a Tuesday election. So we know that this is a factor. Florida reducing early voting days, a number of states reducing early voting days. So we looked at all the data. I looked at it closely this morning. My response, I'm surprised that lines are only twice as long on average for black voters than for white voters. I mean, and this is totally anecdotal, but when I voted in Western Massachusetts, I never even waited 1 second. I mean, it was basically all white people in the room. There were 50 voting booths or whatever you call them, and 15 people in there, people trickling in. You never had to wait even for a second. Now in Brooklyn, New York, a much more significantly non-white area. I was never registered in Brooklyn, New York. I kept my legal residence in Massachusetts when I lived there, but I walked by many times what would have been my polling place on election days. The line went out the door. People were frustrated, many non-white faces in those neighborhoods. And I would say, how long have you been waiting? And people saying an hour and a half. We don't know what's going on. Reports of voting machines that were outdated, etc. And here in Boston, my polling place is in an area that basically it straddles an area of low income subsidized housing and sort of a more gentrified area. So it's pretty 50-50. And there were some pretty significant delays there. And you had very few workers. I saw a huge line. and 2 people checking in the entire location of voters. And how do you have 2 workers here? In Western Massachusetts, we used to have 6 for an area that was a fraction of the size. And so anecdotally, we've seen this. The numbers make sense. My surprise is that black people are only waiting twice as long to vote.
Yeah, it's really not surprising. The tactics seem to have paid off, but I guess it all depends for many people just on where you live, population centers, enthusiasm. But
one thing though, Louis, it's not just about urban areas have more delays. That's sometimes what people will point to. They'll say, well, it's just when there's a lot of people in big cities, it's just going to take longer to vote.
Because we're talking about averages here.
It's still racially tinged, even when you account for that, for the type of precinct that you're looking at. Hey, I told you previously about that new state law in California, which gets rid of the ability to use a personal or religious exemption for vaccination for families that don't want their kids to be vaccinated, but want them to go to public schools. The new law, which was signed into law by Democratic Governor Jerry Brown, says that students entering the 2 checkpoint years, so they check for this in kindergarten and 7th grade, you have to show proof of vaccination, okay? And if you transfer into the school system at, say, 2nd grade, you also have to show proof of vaccination at that time. School started a few days ago in California, in some parts of California, and a whole bunch of Sacramento students were sent home because they showed up for kindergarten and 7th grade with no proof of vaccination. In the Folsom Cordova Unified School District, out of 3,200 students starting kindergarten, 145 were sent home. That's kindergarten and 7th grade, both of the checkpoint years. 145 were sent home because they didn't have immunization records. Of the 145 sent home on the first day of school, 47 got their paperwork or got their vaccinations in order within the next 3 days. 98 were still out 3 days later. And this always gets us back to the sort of the same talking points, which is vaccinations have actually been required in California schools going all the way back to 1962. Nothing has changed as far as that goes. What's changed is you can no longer say, my religion makes it so I don't want vaccines. Thus, my kid needs to go to the school anyway, even though they're not vaccinated. The difference now is you can't get an exemption for religious reasons, which makes sense if we're talking about a public health scenario. And number 2, there's the argument that the government is mandating people get vaccines. No, they're not. They're just saying, if you want to send your kids to public schools, you need to have the vaccines. And part of this is not lack of vaccination. Part of it is lack of access to the records. We don't have a nationalized electronic medical records system. So if you move after 1st grade and you go into 2nd grade somewhere else, you might not have those records. So part of this is logistical. It's not that a lot of these kids are unvaccinated. A lot simply don't have the records. I don't buy for a second that the government is mandating vaccinations. They're just saying, we set up schools, we set up rules for those schools, and here is what they are if you choose to send your kids to these schools. That's it.
Yeah. And if the government were to mandate vaccinations, I take it we'd both be against it, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it strikes me as
unless it gets to a point where the entire country is facing a huge crisis because of lack of that. But I mean, we're nowhere near that.
I've not taken a position writ large about forced vaccination. I mean, generally speaking, I'm against forced medical procedures. That's my instinct, right? And the way it's being looked at, which is, okay, most kids go to public school. These are the rules for public school. If you want to set up an institution and the kids aren't vaccinated, that's sort of up to you. Would my view change if unvaccinated children became so prevalent that they were regularly causing even more outbreaks than we've already seen them cause? I don't know. I don't want to take an emotional position on it, and I really want to think it through more. I'd be interested in hearing from people who are both for and or against mandatory vaccinations, period, which is not what is happening in California. Okay, Louis, I have a voicemail to play. This is just insane. I don't know how long this is going to go on. We first had a call from Troy York saying that there's a conspiracy to put gas stations in rural areas and cool restaurants in urban areas. Then Ramon Ramos called in. It was just Troy York, right? And Ramon Ramos said that the exact same thing, basically. And we said, yeah, this is just Troy York. Then Troy York called in and said, I don't know Ramon Ramos. That's someone else. Of course, they have the exact same voice, but I happen to agree with everything Ramon Ramos said. And then now we have yet another caller who is calling in. It's clearly Troy York. And by the way, they agree with both Troy and Ramon about this issue. Take a listen.
Hi, David. This is Andy Cruz. I was just wondering if you can maybe have your call-in number be the same when you take phone calls. Some people might get confused with a phone number and not be able to have 100 numbers memorized. I had to take issue with what you had said about, I guess, 2 previous callers, saying that there is no conspiracy about having crap big box stores all in the countryside and having all your gas stations and dollar stores and cigarette stores, Dunkin' Donuts, etc. All your corporate crap out in the country where the land is cheap, and then all the heavy investment from foreign countries in high-end restaurants, cafes, gelato places, boutiques, being in the downtown where it's mostly white or wealthy Asian. And if you think there's no conspiracy with that to make certain areas attract more people to draw in.
All right, let's cut it. I mean, it's the same thing. Yeah, we get it. Mr. Cruz, what was this guy's first name? This is Andy Cruz, agrees with Troy York, who agrees with Ramon Ramos, all who call from the same block number at basically the same time of day with the exact same voice, all really interested in the same hyper niche issue.
I've never heard anyone else mention this conspiracy either.
Yeah, the
It's
three
not
people who ever call talking about this have the same voice, call at the same time. Okay, I don't know how much longer we're going to go on, right? I mean, if whoever David Smith calls next with the exact same position, we might just have to put an end to it. I don't even have time to tell you what's on the bonus show today, but it's absolutely tremendous.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.